It's striking how rapidly cities are evolving, especially here in Southeast Asia.
Absolutely.
Take Malaysia, for instance. Their urban population shot up from, what, 66% in 2004 to 74% just 10 years later.
And that trend isn't isolated, is it?
Yeah.
Across Asia Pacific, we're seeing this massive surge in middle-class consumers projected by 2030.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Wow.
More city dwellers, more economic activity sounds good on the surface.
Right, but it's also bringing some serious challenges.
Yeah, think about the air quality in our cities, or just, the time we all spend stuck in traffic. It's getting worse.
And what's really fascinating, or maybe concerning, is recognizing this global pattern. Urbanization, economic development, they drive up energy use.
Which means more CO2 emissions.
Exactly. These urban areas become major hubs for emissions, contributing significantly to, well, global warming and climate change.
Right. And that's really the core of our discussion today, this idea of low-carbon cities. It's a concept that's gaining real traction as we collectively grasp the impact our urban lifestyles have.
It has to, really.
So our goal in this deep dive is to give you, the listener, a clear understanding of the essential ideas, the practical steps involved in creating these low-carbon cities.
And we'll be using a specific example as our guide.
Yes, we'll be exploring the city's low-carbon framework from Malaysia's Ministry of Energy, Green Technology, and Water Ketha.
Yeah, connecting this to the bigger picture, this framework offers a structured way to tackle carbon emissions specifically within cities.
So we'll look at why it's so important, how it actually defines a low-carbon city.
And measures progress, which is key.
And we'll also touch on some real-world examples and the assessment tools they use.
Sounds good.
So let's start with the fundamental question. Why the big focus on low-carbon cities right now? What's the urgency?
Well, the link between industrialization and the huge increase in greenhouse gases that really began way back, late 1700s.
Okay.
Since then, human activities have significantly raised the concentration of gases already in our atmosphere and even introduced new man-made ones. And the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, they've identified 6 key greenhouse gases.
The main culprits.
Pretty much. They're the primary drivers of global warming and climate change because, well, they trap heat. More gases, more trapped heat.
Right, those are the heavy hitters. And Malaysia itself has seen a pretty sharp rise in these emissions, hasn't it?
Oh, indeed. Between 1994 and 2000 alone, Malaysia's greenhouse gas emissions went up by 13% relative to its GDP.
Wow.
And by a huge 32% per person.
32%.
Yeah. Looking at the total picture, by the year 2000, the country's emissions were 55% higher than they were just 6 years earlier in 1994.
That's incredibly fast growth.
It is. And just to give you a bit more context, in 2013, Malaysia's CO2 emissions per capita were 8.0 metric tons,
Okay.
which was significantly higher than the world average back in 2011, which was around 4.94 metric tons.
So well above the average. That really highlights the emissions growth tied to development.
It certainly does.
But it's not like Malaysia hasn't been aware of this or, doing anything about it, right?
Absolutely not. Malaysia's commitment to sustainable development and tackling climate change actually goes back quite a way to the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment.
Okay, so early awareness.
Yes. And then after the Rio Summit in '92, the Malaysian National Environmental Policy was established. That really provided a foundation.
Right.
And since then, there have been several key milestones. You had the 9th Malaysia Plan, focusing on improving quality of life sustainably. The National Green Technology Policy in 2009.
Okay.
And that significant commitment to cut CO2 emission intensity relative to GDP by 40% per capita by 2020, compared to 2005 levels.
That was a big target, but wasn't there a condition attached?
Yes, very much so.
Right.
It was conditional on receiving technology transfer and financial support from developed nations.
Right, that's an important detail. So there's clear understanding and commitment at the national level. Now let's bring it back down to our cities. What's their specific role in this emissions picture?
Cities are really, you could say, ground zero for this challenge. Well, they are the major engines of energy consumption, just huge consumers.
Okay.
And as a result, they're significant sources of carbon emissions. Let me give you a stark example.
Go ahead.
The world's 27 largest cities, just 27 of them, they consume something like 9.3% of the world's electricity.
Wow.
And generate 12.6% of the world's waste.
That's disproportionate.
Hugely. especially when you consider they only house about 6.7% of the global population.
That really puts the concentration of impact into perspective.
It does. The sheer density of people and economic activity makes cities critical targets if we want to reduce overall global emissions.
Okay, so with all that context, how do we actually define a low-carbon city? What are we aiming for? What does it look like?
Essentially, a low-carbon city is one that prioritizes using energy very, very efficiently.
Efficiency first.
Yes, and increasingly relies on renewable energy sources, solar, wind, etc.
Makes sense.
It minimizes all forms of pollution, not just CO2.
Yeah.
It uses land wisely, efficiently.
Avoiding sprawl.
Exactly. And it actively embraces the principles of sustainable development across the board. The overall goal is just to significantly reduce its environmental footprint, specifically its CO2 emissions.
So a city designed to tread lightly on the planet.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, the why and the what are definitely becoming clearer now. It's always inspiring to see this in action. Are there global examples, cities really leading the charge on becoming low carbon?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
There are some really notable examples out there. Let's look at Copenhagen in Denmark.
Okay, Copenhagen. Heard good things.
They've set an incredibly ambitious goal to become the world's first carbon-neutral capital by 2025.
Carbon neutral. Wow.
How? They're tackling it through a whole range of initiatives. Big focus on transforming transport in, amazing bike lanes, great public transit,
Right.
reducing energy use in buildings, improving water and waste management. It's holistic.
Then it's working.
It seems to be. Copenhagen was named the European Green Capital in 2014, consistently ranks high on green economy indexes. They've even cleaned up their harbor so much you can swim in it now.
Swimming in the harbor, that's impressive. Shows what a concerted effort can achieve.
It really does.
Okay, carbon neutral by 2025 is bold. What about other parts of the world?
Well, let's hop over to Sweden. Stockholm.
Stockholm, okay.
They were actually the first European green capital back in 2010.
Ah, pioneers.
Exactly. Their approach is built on this long-term vision, combining economic growth with environmental sustainability for everyone living there.
So not seeing it as an either.
Precisely. And they've already achieved a significant reduction over 25% in carbon emissions per person since 1990.
That's substantial.
And their goal is complete independence from fossil fuels by 2050.
Fossil fuel free? Another big goal.
It is. Their emissions per person dropped from 5.4 tons in 1990 and were projected to hit just 2.8 tons by 2015. It shows what sustained effort can do.
Incredible long-term commitment and crucially measurable progress. Any examples from, say, continental Europe?
Absolutely. Let's look at Freiburg in Germany.
Freiburg, heard of it? The ecological capital.
That's the one. Internationally recognized for its quality of life and strong sustainability focus.
What are they doing specifically?
Lots of things. Efficient regional heating systems,
Yeah.
comprehensive recycling programs, really minimizing waste, strict low-energy building standards.
Building codes are key.
Definitely. And their urban planning, deliberately focused development within existing boundaries, prevents sprawl, preserve green space,
Smart growth.
and they've heavily prioritized cycling, walking, and an excellent public transit system. They call it a city of short distances.
A city of short distances. I love that. It really highlights how urban design directly impacts our carbon footprint, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Makes sustainable living easier, more appealing.
Okay, and what about across the Atlantic? Any North American examples?
Vancouver, Canada is a great one. They set a goal to be the world's greenest city by 2020.
Ambitious. How did they approach it?
Their strategy focused on shifting to renewables. They're aiming for a 100% renewable power by 2040.
Wow, 100%.
Expanding their rapid transit, actively promoting cycling and walking to cut down on car dependency.
Similar themes, emerging transport, energy.
Yes. Their Greenest City Action Plan had these broad goals: zero carbon, zero waste, and healthy ecosystems. A really integrated vision.
These examples are great. They really show that becoming a low-carbon city isn't just a pipe dream.
Not at all.
And different cities are taking diverse but effective paths to get there. Now, it's one thing to have these goals, but how do cities actually track their progress? How do they learn from each other? Are there, like, global assessment programs?
Yes, definitely. There are several important programs and registries that play a crucial role here supporting cities.
Okay.
One is the Low Carbon City Development Program, or LCCDP.
LCCDP, got it.
This is a pretty comprehensive systems-based approach. It gives cities a framework, specific requirements
For what exactly?
for planning, implementing, monitoring, and importantly, accounting for their low carbon investments and climate mitigation efforts. across all city sectors over time.
So quite structured.
Very. It was first used in Rio de Janeiro, and it really emphasizes the link between low-carbon development and green economic growth. Even looks at environmental markets.
Interesting. So an economically minded approach, too. What other initiatives are out there helping cities?
ICLEI, that's Local Governments for Sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
is a major global network, really focused on supporting low-carbon urban development.
ICLEI, right. Heard of them.
They have several key programs.
Yeah.
One is Green Climate Cities, or GCC. It offers a comprehensive methodology, tools, based on over 2 decades of experience, helping cities analyze emissions, act, and accelerate progress.
Experience matters.
It does. They also run the Urban Low Emission Development Strategies Project, Urban LEDS, with UN Habitat.
Okay.
That promotes low-emission development in model and satellite cities globally, often with support from European cities.
So knowledge sharing across borders.
Exactly. And their Energy Safe Cities initiative focuses specifically on East Asia, pushing for a rapid transition to low-carbon, resilient, safe urban energy systems, aiming for 100% renewables by 2030 in those participating cities.
Wow, ICLEI sounds like a vital hub for driving action and sharing what works.
They really are.
What about that crucial piece tracking and, publicly reporting emissions?
Accountability.
That's where the Carbon Climate Registry, or CCR, comes in.
CCR, okay.
Launched in 2010. It's basically a global platform specifically for local government cities, towns, to publicly report their GHG reduction commitments.
So transparency.
Yes. They report their emissions inventories, their mitigation actions, adaptation actions, everything.
And does this data get used?
Definitely. The data reported to the CCR feeds into things like the Local Government Climate Roadmap. It even gets presented at the big UN climate conferences, the COPs.
So it gives cities a voice at the global level.
Precisely. It ensures transparency and accountability for local climate action. Okay, so clear goals, implementation, and then being open about the results. Makes sense. Are there other programs helping cities strategize?
Yes, the Carbon Trust has a low-carbon cities program.
The Carbon Trust, okay.
They provide expert advice, practical guidance to cities and regions, help them achieve real carbon and energy efficiency savings, while also fostering low-carbon economic growth.
So, advice and support.
Exactly. They've developed a clear 5-step methodology based on their experience with public sector carbon management. It helps cities build prioritized, actionable plans to cut emissions effectively at the city or regional level.
It really sounds like there's a whole ecosystem of support and assessment out there for cities serious about tackling their carbon footprint.
There is, which is encouraging.
Now let's circle back to where we started that framework from Malaysia, the Sustainable Development Framework for Low Carbon Cities, the LCCF. How does this fit into that bigger global picture we've just discussed?
Right, the LCCF, it's specifically tailored for the Malaysian context.
Yeah.
It operates within a larger sustainable development framework. The idea there is that truly sustainable cities are, well, great places to live now and in the future.
Livable cities.
Exactly. They meet people's needs, they're environmentally responsible, high quality of life. This broader framework covers 8 connected elements.
8? Like what?
Things like governance, transport and mobility, the built environment, natural environment, services, the economy, equality and diversity, and community well-being.
Comprehensive.
Very. Covering the economic, social, and environmental pillars of sustainable development.
Okay, so sustainable cities are the big goal, and low carbon is a critical piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
How does the LCCF specifically help achieve this in Malaysia?
The LCCF is essentially a focused subset of that bigger picture. Its specific emphasis is on tracking and ultimately reducing carbon emissions at the city level in Malaysia.
Got it. Tracking and reducing.
Yes, the LCCF and its assessment system, which is called LCCF Track.
LCCF track, okay.
They help continuously monitor and improve the carbon performance of cities striving for sustainability. It provides a performance-based benchmark.
Performance-based. We'll come back to that.
We will. And it aligns with national policies and complements other green building or city rating tools used in Malaysia.
So it connects everything?
You can think of it as a bridge.
Yeah.
It connects Malaysia's national GHG reduction targets, like that 45% reduction goal,
Right.
the work of government ministries, the actual implementation by city developers and managers, actions by building owners, all measured against performance indicators and national assessment tools.
It sounds like it provides a unified approach, a clear direction within Malaysia. Does it work alongside other existing green guidelines there?
Absolutely. It's designed to be complementary. For example, there's the Green Neighborhood Planning Guideline, the GNG.
Yeah.
That was developed by the Federal Department of Town and Country Planning back in 2012.
Mm.
It's more of a practical planning manual for designing green neighborhoods. It informs state policies, how local authorities evaluate development plans. The LCCF and G&G work hand in hand for a more integrated approach.
So the LCCF acts as this vital link between broad national policies and the practical tools on the ground. Makes sense. What makes the LCCF maybe different from other international green city rating systems?
Well, one key distinction is its holistic view. It considers the entire life cycle of a city.
The whole life cycle, what does that mean?
From the very beginning, the pre-development planning,
Hmm.
through construction, the long period of occupancy, maintenance, city operations, and even future redevelopment or regeneration phases.
Okay, cradle to grave almost.
Exactly. Many other tools, often criteria-based ones, tend to focus more narrowly, maybe just on the design and construction of new buildings.
Right.
But this life cycle perspective is critical. The UN Environment Program highlighted that something like 80% of a building's total CO2 emissions happen during its occupancy and use phase.
80%. Wow. So focusing only on the build misses the biggest chunk.
Precisely. It's essential to look beyond just the initial design.
That's a really important point. It's not just about building green initially. It's ensuring the city operates sustainably long term. And you mentioned the LCCF is performance-based. What does that mean in practice?
Right, performance-based. It means it primarily measures the actual environmental impact, the real output,
In terms of?
in terms of total carbon emissions. This includes emissions from construction itself, the embodied carbon in materials, the energy used to make the steel, the cement,
Okay.
and the operational carbon emissions produced over the building's or city's life.
So measuring the real footprint.
Yes. And it prioritizes the performance criteria that have the biggest environmental impact. The focus is on achieving measurable year-on-year reductions. Abatement.
How does that differ from, say, criteria-based systems?
Well, criteria-based systems might award points for including certain green features, like having bike racks or using a specific material, which is good, but it doesn't always guarantee a lower actual carbon footprint. Sometimes it can lead to point chasing, focusing on getting points for the certificate without necessarily achieving deep environmental improvements.
Ah, I see. Focusing on the outcome, not just the inputs.
Exactly. And performance-based systems track ongoing performance, not just periodic reviews, like some criteria systems might.
Okay, so the LCCF is fundamentally about real, quantifiable GHG reductions. How does it break down a city's activities to achieve this?
It uses what it calls a GHG reduction approach. It focuses on 4 key elements, the major sources of carbon in cities:
4 key elements. What are they?
urban environment, urban transportation, urban infrastructure, and building.
Okay, environment, transport, infrastructure, building. Seems logical.
And then these 4 are further divided into 15 specific performance criteria.
15.
And those break down even further into 41 detailed sub-criteria.
Wow, quite granular.
It is. And each sub-criterion has a very clear intent driving carbon reduction in line with Malaysia's national targets.
Okay, those 4 elements, urban environment, transportation infrastructure, building, seem like a solid way to structure this. We're getting a good handle on the framework. Let's maybe dive a bit deeper into some specific criteria to really get a feel for them, starting with urban environment.
Sure. Within urban environment, site selection is crucial. The LCCF really emphasizes brownfield and greenfield redevelopment.
Okay, using previously developed land, criterion UE 1 to 4, right?
That's the one. The aim is to prioritize redeveloping underused or abandoned industrial or commercial sites.
Why is that so important?
Well, it reduces the pressure to build on untouched greenfield land. Plus, you can often use existing infrastructure, roads, utilities that are already there.
More efficient.
Much more. The framework actually notes that developing an acre on infill or brownfield land emits about 7,000 kilograms of CO2,
Okay.
which is a saving of 3,000 kilograms compared to developing a greenfield acre.
Significant saving.
Yeah. So the framework recommends local authorities build this into their planning, direct projects to these sites, maybe even offer incentives.
Makes perfect sense. Reuse what we have. What other site selection factors does it cover?
Another important one is hill slope development, UE 1 to 5.
Developing on hills.
Or rather, protecting hill slopes.
Yeah.
While avoiding development there might not directly cut GHG emissions immediately,
Right.
protecting these areas is vital for long-term resilience. It minimizes soil erosion, preserves greenfield areas, protects biodiversity.
So environmental protection.
Exactly. The framework stresses sustainable management, strict controls on any hill slope development, and it does link back to carbon.
How so?
by mentioning the role of trees and forests on those slopes in capturing and storing CO2 reinforces their value as carbon sinks that we need to protect.
Protecting natural landscapes is definitely a recurring theme. Okay, moving to how we actually design cities' urban form. What criteria does the LCCF highlight here?
Under urban form, mixed-use development is key. That's UE21.
Mixed use, integrating different functions.
Precisely. Encouraging developments that combine residential, office, commercial, other uses, all close together.
Why is that low carbon?
It promotes transport efficiency and walkability. If your work, shop, services are nearby, you're less likely to need a private car for every trip.
Reduces travel distances. Makes sense. What else under urban form?
Road and parking, UE23. This focuses on minimizing the negative environmental impacts of these surfaces.
Less asphalt and concrete.
Ideally, yes. The recommendation is that the total area for roads and parking should be less than 20% of the development area.
Okay.
The framework even points out the embodied carbon in making asphalt and concrete and their contribution to the urban heat island effect.
Right. Limiting roads and parking discourages car use and helps with that heat island effect. Does the LCCF address the urban heat island or UHI effect directly?
Yes, it does. Criterion UE2-6 specifically targets reducing UHI.
How?
By significantly increasing vegetation, planting shade trees, putting greenery on rooftops and building facades, more green cover.
And does that actually cool things down?
The framework cites a general rule. A 10% increase in urban vegetation can reduce ambient temperature by about 3 degrees Celsius.
3 degrees. That's noticeable.
Definitely. And again, it reiterates the carbon absorption benefits of trees and forests in mitigating UHI.
So literally, greening our cities keeps them cooler. What about preserving existing nature within urban areas?
That falls under urban greenery and environment quality, specifically UE31. Preserve natural ecology, water body, and biodiversity.
Okay.
The idea here is to promote natural carbon sequestration by actively preserving existing natural environments, forests, rivers, lakes, wetlands within the city.
Protecting those natural carbon sinks.
Exactly. The framework gives figures for how much CO2 tropical forests, wetlands, even individual mature trees can absorb, underscores their vital role.
What else under greenery?
There's UE32, green open space, aiming to increase the overall percentage of green open space. Good for GHG reduction, obviously, but also for recreation.
Quality of life, too.
Absolutely. It mentions photosynthesis, how plants absorb CO2, and then UE33, number of trees.
Just planting more trees.
Pretty much. Increasing tree coverage enhances carbon sequestration, plus all those other benefits, shade, cleaner air, reducing UHI. It also notes older, established trees sequester more carbon.
Right. So it's really clear the urban environment element is heavily focused on integrating nature into the city fabric, not just for looks, but as a core strategy for cutting carbon and making cities more livable.
That's a perfect summary.
Okay, let's shift gears to urban transportation. What are the key criteria for cutting transport emissions?
Well, a foundational one is vehicle kilometers of travel reduction, VKT reduction. That's UT11.
Reducing how much we drive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The goal is to cut the total distance vehicles travel in the city. How? By encouraging a shift away from private cars. Towards what? Towards public transport buses, trains, shared mobility carpooling, and active transport walking and cycling, especially for shorter trips.
Makes sense.
The framework provides a striking CO2 comparison. A single car versus a bus over the same distance. Big difference.
I bet.
And it emphasizes walking and cycling. 0 kilograms of CO2. The best options.
Can't argue with 0. What builds on that?
UT22. Increase in public transport use. This focuses on making public transport better, more attractive.
Oh.
Improving availability, accessibility, affordability, route coverage, providing clear, real-time information, making it the preferred choice.
So it has to be convenient and reliable.
Exactly. And again, it highlights the CO2 advantage of public transport over cars.
Making public transport the easy choice seems crucial. What about the types of vehicles we do use? Does the LCCF cover that?
Yes, under Performance Criteria 7, use of low-carbon transport. 2 key sub-criteria here.
Okay.
First, UT4 Day 1, use of more fuel-efficient vehicles and green freight transport, encouraging the adoption of cleaner vehicles.
Like hybrids, EVs?
Exactly. Hybrids, fully electric vehicles, EVs, natural gas vehicles, NGVs, vehicles using biofuels. And it provides CO2 emission examples per kilometer for different types.
Helps quantify the benefit.
Right. It also mentions potential long-term cost savings and reduced resource use with these technologies.
And the second sub-criterion?
UT42, number of charging stations. Simply put, More charging stations indicate growing EV adoption, which directly cuts transport emissions.
Infrastructure enabling the shift. Got it. So it's both reducing travel distance and cleaning up the vehicles we use. What about traffic itself? Congestion must impact emissions, right?
Absolutely. Performance Criteria 8 addresses improvement to level of service of road links and junctions.
Level of service.
Yeah, basically how well traffic flows. Subcriterion UT51 looks at the performance of the roads and junctions themselves, and UT52 looks at average link speeds and overall journey speeds.
Why does speed matter for emissions?
Because congestion stop-start traffic, low average speeds significantly increases CO2 emissions per vehicle. Maintaining optimal, smoother traffic flow reduces emissions.
So reducing that frustrating stop-and-go traffic isn't just good for our sanity, it's good for the air, too.
Exactly. Saves time, saves fuel, cuts emissions.
Okay. And finally, for transport, what about the link between transport infrastructure and how the city is actually laid out?
That's where Performance Criteria 9 comes in. Utilization of Transit-Oriented Development, TOD, approach.
TOD, heard that term.
Specifically, Subcriterion UT62 focuses on walking and cycling facilities to support access and mobility to from public transit nodes.
So making it easy to walk or bike to the bus stop or train station?
Precisely. Enhancing infrastructure for non-motorized transport, good sidewalks, protected bike lanes makes it more appealing to get to and from public transport hubs.
Which encourages more people to use public transport instead of driving the whole way?
That's the goal. Encourage that shift from private cars. And again, the framework hammers home. Walking and cycling release zero CO2. Huge carbon savings compared to driving.
It really paints a picture of an integrated network connecting different modes, prioritizing walking, cycling, and public transit as key to a low-carbon system.
That's absolutely right.
Okay, let's move to our third element, urban infrastructure. What are the performance criteria here?
Under urban infrastructure, one key area is infrastructure provision itself. Criterion UI11 is about land take for infrastructure and utility services.
Minimizing the land used for pipes, wires, roads.
Essentially, yes. Minimizing the footprint through efficient design, considering current and future needs. Using land smartly for essentials like water tanks, substations, utility networks.
Why is land take important for carbon?
Because land use change, especially converting greenfield land for infrastructure, can release significant stored carbon and prevent future sequestration.
Okay. What else under infrastructure provision?
UI12 addresses earthwork management. This encourages really well-planned construction earthworks.
Meaning?
Minimal cut and fill. Balancing the amount of earth moved to reduce the need for heavy machinery like dump trucks and excavators, which burn a lot of fuel.
Lowering construction emissions.
Yeah, exactly. And it also helps prevent issues like soil erosion and flooding. The framework even gives indicative CO2 figures for dump trucks and excavators.
Interesting. So smart planning minimizes construction impact. What about waste? That seems like a major infrastructure issue.
Definitely. Waste management is critical, with 3 key criteria. First, UI21, construction waste management.
Reducing waste from building sites.
Yes. Aiming to cut waste like scrap steel, wood, concrete. How? Better designed to minimize offcuts, using sustainable or recycled materials and applying the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle.
Makes sense.
The framework specifically mentions the high CO2 emissions from producing steel as a big reason to minimize its wastage.
Okay. What about waste from factories?
It's UI22, industrial waste management, encouraging industries to use cleaner production methods, green tech, prevent waste at the source.
Prevent it altogether.
Ideally. Or explore industrial symbiosis, where one factory's waste is another's raw material, and increasing the use of recycled materials.
So.
It gives examples of embodied CO2 in things like tiles, pipes, plasterboard to show the impact.
And finally, the waste we all generate at home.
UI23, municipal solid waste, MSW management, aiming to drastically reduce household waste going to landfills.
Ow.
Through promoting 3R activities, community recycling programs, composting, and converting organic waste into useful things like biogas or compost, rather than landfilling it where it produces methane.
Right, capturing value from waste.
Exactly. The framework notes the high per-person waste emissions in Malaysia and the emissions from transporting all that waste in dump trucks.
It's clear that tackling waste at every stage, construction, industry, homes, is crucial for cutting emissions. What about the infrastructure for essential services like energy and water,
Right. UI 3.1 focuses on energy efficiency and infrastructure.
like streetlights?
That's a perfect example.
Okay.
Implementing programs like replacing old streetlights with energy-efficient LEDs or using solar power for infrastructure needs.
The big savings potential there.
Huge. The framework quantifies the CO2 difference between old bulbs and LEDs and gives an average CO2 per kilowatt-hour figure.
And renewables.
That's UI 3.2. Renewable energy. Strongly promoting more use of solar, wind, biogas for infrastructure and city energy needs, reducing reliance on fossil fuels for power generation.
Makes sense.
It also highlights the potential of district cooling systems, often much more efficient than individual building ACs.
District cooling,
Yeah.
okay. And water.
UI 4.1 addresses water efficiency, aiming to cut consumption of treated water
How?
by minimizing non-revenue water, basically, leaks in the system or illegal connections, and promoting water saving, like rainwater harvesting and recycling gray water from showers and sinks.
Using water more wisely.
Exactly. The framework notes the CO2 emissions associated with treating and pumping water, highlighting the energy used in the water sector.
So making our energy and water systems efficient and clean is vital. Okay, let's tackle the last key element. Building. What are the criteria for low-carbon buildings in the LCCF?
Within building, the first criteria, set number 14, deals with sustainable buildings management systems.
Management systems.
Yes. B11 is about energy management systems, encouraging formal systems like ISO 5001 or local equivalents to continuously monitor and manage energy and water use in buildings, new and existing.
So active management.
Right. And B12 looks at facility management, promoting an integrated approach where one coordinated team manages all building operations, ensuring energy management is thorough and ongoing.
Why the focus on management?
Because buildings last a long time. The framework notes around 60 years typically. Effective management ensures they perform well and maintain low emissions throughout that long lifespan. High-performing buildings.
Okay, efficient management is important, but what about the actual design and operation of the buildings?
That's performance criteria 15, low-carbon building. B21 covers passive and active designs.
Passive and active.
Yes, strongly encouraging new buildings and retrofits of old ones to use both. Passive strategies are things like smart orientation for natural light and less heat gain, good insulation, natural ventilation.
Using the building's design itself.
Exactly. And active technologies are things like efficient lighting, appliances, HVAC systems, and integrating renewables like solar panels right on the building.
Combining both for maximum effect.
That's the idea. Reducing heat gain, reducing energy demand, cutting CO2. The framework even gives an example of how orientation impacts solar heat gain.
Concrete examples help. What else under low-carbon building?
B22 focuses on operational energy consumption, setting the goal for buildings to use the absolute minimum energy needed for their function. It suggests benchmarking against standards like the Common Carbon Metric, adapted from Malaysia.
Measuring actual energy use during operation.
Yes. And similarly, B23 addresses operational water consumption, monitoring water efficiency, benchmarking against standards, minimizing water use, and related emissions.
Energy and water efficiency in operation. Got it.
And finally, a really important one, B24, preserve existing building stock by retrofitting.
Retrofitting instead of demolishing.
Exactly. Recognizing that retrofitting extends a building's life, conserves resources tied up in the existing structure, minimizes demolition waste.
Which has its own carbon footprint.
Huge one.
Yeah.
And retrofitting allows upgrading systems with new, efficient technologies. It leads to substantial CO2 savings compared to rebuilding.
Makes sense. Keeping the embodied energy.
Precisely. The framework gives CO2 figures for cement and aluminum production and quantifies savings from things like adding solar panels during a retrofit.
It's a truly comprehensive framework, isn't it? Covering site selection right through to retrofitting decades later.
It aims to be, yes.
Now that we have this solid understanding of the framework and its parameters, how is it actually put into practice? Can a city approach this in different ways?
Yes, the LCCF outlines two main implementation approaches.
Okay, what are they?
The first is the city-based approach. This is the holistic one, aiming to mitigate more than 10 of those detailed sub-criteria across all four elements.
The full package.
Pretty much. It requires a comprehensive process. Establish a full baseline of current emissions, then develop and implement a wide-ranging plan to really cut the city's overall footprint.
Any examples of cities doing this?
The framework mentions Curitiba in Brazil and Stockholm, which we discussed earlier, as examples of this broad, integrated approach.
Okay. What's the second approach?
It's called the one-system approach. This is often used as a starting point, more focused.
How so?
A city chooses to mitigate one or more specific performance criteria, but fewer than 10 sub-criteria in total, maybe focusing on just one element like transport or waste.
So it's starting smaller.
Exactly. It might have less immediate impact on total emissions, but it lets a city begin the journey, gain experience, build capacity, and maybe develop a roadmap for a fuller approach later.
A stepping stone.
You could say that. Yokohama in Japan is mentioned as an example that started with this more targeted approach.
So cities can choose based on their situation, potentially scaling up later. What are the actual practical steps involved in applying the LCCF, whichever approach they choose?
It generally involves 5 key steps.
5 steps, okay.
Step 1. Identify the project and mobilize city stakeholders. Form a team. Develop a project brief outlining the scope. Get everyone on board.
Crucial first step.
Step 2. Establish emission baselines and opportunities. Measure current emissions accurately. Figure out where the biggest reduction opportunities lie. A provisional certificate might be issued here.
Baseline first. Makes sense. Step 3.
Develop a comprehensive city strategy. Set specific, measurable targets for carbon reduction. Create a detailed action plan, the Green City Blueprint.
Plan. Step 4.
Implement and measure. Actually carry out the projects and initiatives in the plan and track their performance.
Action and tracking.
And step 5, review and monitor. Continuously review performance, evaluate progress. This ongoing process can eventually lead to diamond recognition from the federal government for significant sustained reductions.
Diamond recognition sounds prestigious.
It signifies a serious, continuous commitment to being a low-carbon city.
Okay, that 5-step process seems clear. How does that diamond recognition actually work for the local authorities involved? They seem key.
Local authorities are vital, yes. They drive the policy initiatives. They're usually responsible for creating that project brief document that sets the LCCF carbon baseline for their area.
So they own the baseline process.
Largely. That involves defining the project boundaries, picking a base year and target year, declaring the population, and compiling all the necessary data for the base year according to the criteria they're tackling.
A lot of data work.
It is. Based on that baseline assessment, they need to strategically prioritize the actions that offer the biggest bang for their buck, carbon-wise.
Makes sense.
Then they establish the business as usual, or BAU baseline, what emissions would look like with no action plan.
The comparison point.
Exactly. Once the baseline is done, they might get that provisional certificate. But the diamond recognition comes later.
After implementation.
Yes, awarded by the federal government if they demonstrate significant, measurable reduction performance during Phase 3, the blueprint implementation phase. It involves rigorous data collection, review, assessment, and independent verification by Green Tech Malaysia.
So it's properly verified.
Oh, yes. And interestingly, private developers who really contribute to a local authority achieving diamond status can also get a special award certificate.
Recognizing private sector contribution too. Good. Now, you mentioned a checklist earlier. What's the role of the LCCF checklist in all this?
Yes, the checklist. It's the practical tool for assessing how well a project aligns with the LCCF criteria.
How detailed is it?
It has 107 specific checklist elements organized under those 4 main categories: urban environment, transport, infrastructure, and building.
Okay. And how's it scored?
To get a basic pass, a project needs a score of 50 or above. Below 50, they need to go back and incorporate more low-carbon strategies.
Right.
The scores for each of the 4 elements are combined for an overall LCCF checklist score, and that score determines the level of achievement.
What are the levels?
Below 50% is unclassified, 50-59% is pass, then good, 60-69, very good, 70-79, excellent, 80-89. And the top level is outstanding for scores above 90%.
A clear grading system. How do applicants actually use this checklist for their projects?
It's generally a 4-step process for applying the checklist.
4 steps for the checklist, okay.
First, identify the project. Formally declare the specifics, the area, boundaries, population.
Define the scope.
Second, fill up the checklist form. Carefully select all the elements that genuinely apply to their specific project.
Be relevant. Third.
Review and approval. This is important. Applicants, especially private developers, should consult closely with their local authority.
Why?
To ensure the selected elements fit local plans and policies. The local authority then reviews and approves the checklist via the LCCF track online system. Once approved, the project is officially registered.
Okay. And the final step.
Baseline development. Preparing the detailed project brief document and collecting all the necessary baseline data for the selected checklist elements for the chosen base year.
Feeding back into the main process. Got it. And you've mentioned LCCF track a few times. Can you just clarify the relationship between the overall LCCF framework and the LCCF track system?
Sure. Think of the LCCF framework as the blueprint, the overarching structure. It provides the core principles, the detailed list of elements, the what and the why.
The concept.
Exactly. LCCF track, on the other hand, is the dedicated online assessment system. It's the tool.
The how.
Right. It takes the elements defined in the framework and translates them into quantifiable carbon equivalents. It allows for the actual calculation, tracking, and reporting of progress in cutting the carbon footprint.
So they work together.
Fundamentally interdependent, yes. Designed to be used sequentially. Understand the framework first, then use LCCF track to assess, calculate, and monitor over time.
That clears it up perfectly. Framework provides the what and why. LCCF track provides the how for measurement and management. Before we wrap this deep dive, the full LCCF document includes a glossary, you said. Are there any other key terms helpful for listeners?
Yes, a few might be useful. Abatement. That just means any action taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
BAU, we mentioned that, business as usual. The scenario with no action.
Right.
Biodiversity, the variety of life in an area. Brownfield, previously developed land, maybe underused or contaminated.
Got it.
Carbon footprint, the total GHGs generated by an activity, person, product, expressed as CO2 equivalent.
Okay.
Carbon sequestration, the long-term capture and storage of atmospheric CO2, usually in forests, soils, oceans.
Natural storage.
Yes. UHI, urban heat island effect, cities being warmer than surrounding areas. And VMT, vehicle miles traveled, total distance driven in an area, similar to VKT we discussed.
That's a helpful, quick glossary.
Yeah.
So bringing everything together, what are the main takeaways from this deep dive into the low-carbon cities framework?
Well, I think the first is just the urgency. Tackling carbon emissions in our growing cities is a global priority.
Can't ignore it.
Second, the LCCF in Malaysia offers a really comprehensive, structured approach to do this locally.
A practical tool.
Yes. And third, it provides flexible pathways. The city-based versus one-system approach, recognizing cities have different starting points and capacities.
Adaptable.
And crucially, it establishes a clear process for assessment and recognition of real progress. It underscores that even starting small, with targeted efforts, can be a vital first step towards truly sustainable, low-carbon cities.
It's been fascinating unpacking all these layers. I can definitely feel those aha moments, starting to think how these ideas, these criteria, might apply in different cities, maybe even our own communities.
Exactly. That's the hope, that it sparks that connection for you, the listener.
Yeah.
And maybe the most thought-provoking idea to leave you with is this. Creating low-carbon cities isn't just an environmental necessity, though it certainly is that.
It's more.
It's also a massive opportunity, a chance to envision and actually build cities that are more livable, more resilient to future shocks, and yes, more economically vibrant for everyone.
Opportunity, not just obligation.
Precisely. So as you reflect on this, maybe consider which single aspect of the LCCF resonated most with you, and what initial step, even a small one, could perhaps be taken in that area in your own community or city.